Hi everybody, welcome to Stashblaster Quilts. My name is Maria Spatelnik and I'm here to help you make more quilts in less time with less stress. Hi everybody, oops. Stashblaster Quilts. My name is Maria. Sorry about that. I had my phone on just to make sure that it came up and it had volume and you could hear me and all that. I have turned that off now. Anyway, hi. As you can see, I have not gotten my design walls put back up. I have only been home a few days from my trip. So I'm going to be telling you about the trip today. And I'm going to talk about a couple of emails that I got based on the Orphan Block Challenge. So, yeah, that's about all that's going on with that. The trip. So I was here on Wednesday and we flew on Friday, 2 weeks ago. So obviously nothing happened here, like I told you. But I was really surprised. We flew for the first time on Virgin Atlantic. And if this is your first time here, I am a professional organizer by trade, but I also speak internationally on hoarding disorder and elder services. So in this particular case, I was talking about hoarding and how it affects the community at a conference in Manchester, England. Well, my husband and I went over early, so we flew into Heathrow because it was a direct flight. The last time I went to England, I had layovers in Iceland, and it was a nightmare. I did not want to do that again. So we got on this Virgin Atlantic flight, and it was cheaper than other airlines for the upgraded ticket. I am not a small girl. Putting me in an economy seat is going to mean medical problems for me. So we bought these premium seats or premier seats, extra wide, da-da-da-da. So I'm thinking that these are like regular first class seats that you get on Delta, United, one of these others. And this is Virgin Atlantic. No. These are the old economy seats. I had to go in at an angle and get one hip under the arm of the chair so that I could flop the other hip in. By the end of the trip, I was swollen from the pressure from the sides. It was not a good thing. They did have upper class seats. Those were $10,000 a ticket. No. No. Those turned into beds, and they were these pods. Somebody paid for an infant and a 2-year-old to be up there. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But anyway, that's beside the point. But I did make it. Thank God I wasn't in economy. If I was, I have no idea, because I would never have fit into the seat. So, I know, I do have quite a bit of fluff, but this was actually right at bone. It was not squeezable. Let's put it that way. But overall, the flight was fine. On the way there were no two seats next to each other, but Scott and I sat across the aisle from each other, so that was kind of nice. The staff was amazing. They were wonderful. I had to get up a couple of times to move around and stretch just to make sure I didn't wind up with some circulation problems. So I was doing stretches in the galley, basically. And they were all very, very nice about that. They were in different areas of the plane. It was a nice big plane. Where we were in the extra wide seat section, it was 2 seats, 3 seats, 2 seats. In economy, it was 3, 4, and 3. So you can imagine how much smaller those seats had to be. It was just insane. Anyway, so we got there. We landed okay. We had wheelchair service, which was great. I have been having some heart issues lately, and Scott does not walk well. So it was funny because at Dulles, they give you one person who runs you all the way through to your gate. In Heathrow, I think we had 5 or 6 different people. They would just take us to this area and then hand us off, and the next person would take us, and the next person would take us. Thank God I wasn't trying to keep up, because these people were zooming. I would not have been able to stay up with them. Got through no problem. Got our luggage. Got Scott's walker. Then we went to go and get the rental car. That did not go well. They told us to go to Terminal 5, and that's where our car would be, because they knew we were coming in on Virgin Atlantic. But we came in on Terminal 3. So we were looking around, and the guy said, okay, this isn't where Sixt, S-I-X-T, is the rental company. This isn't where they pick up over here. So we went over there. And we were waiting around, another couple was waiting around, and finally we're about to leave when we see the Sixt van coming. Great. They take us to Terminal 2 and make us get out and walk in and go up to arrivals. So we basically went about 4 blocks of walking with 2 people who don't walk very well, particularly Scott. Several stops for him to sit on the rollator and rest. Then we get up there, and they said, well, you're in Terminal 2. You're supposed to pick up your vehicle in Terminal 5. I'm like, well, now what do we do? Now, keep in mind, I don't sleep well the night of a trip. We got there 3 hours early. It was an overnight, but I don't sleep on the plane. So this is like 26, 27 hours into my day. She said, it's okay. I can cancel that reservation and give you one here. No charge, no problem. Okay. She said, well, I can give you an equivalent to what you had over there, which was paid for. It was like $300. Or I can give you an SUV with a sat nav. GPS? Yes, please. Way more expensive because it was a BMW. Did not realize that until I'd already said yes. Added Scott on as a driver, which added another like 250 pounds to the cost. Got full coverage because I knew I was driving on the left, unfamiliar areas, roundabouts, etc. There was a decent chance I was going to get dinged up somewhere along the way, and I did not want to have to pay for it. So this was a very expensive car rental for the week. She takes us upstairs. She actually even helped me load the car. It was wonderful of her. We loaded it up. I'm sitting on the right side of the car, ready to drive on the left side of the road after almost no sleep, no idea where I'm going, and it's London adjacent. Yay, because we were staying in Leviston. I actually did okay. I really did. I was highly stressed by the time we were there and got to the hotel. It's daylight there. You know, and that's fine, but it was like, oh. We stayed in this little hotel called the White House, which is amusing because the restaurant we had our wedding at was the little White House in Buffalo, New York. But there is no parking out front. Now, what I did not know about the London area, because where I was last time, which was 2 years ago, was definitely more city center. Nobody parked on the streets. Everybody had to park in a garage. People were parked on the sidewalks. And this is a little tiny SUV. Small enough that the walker, when it was folded from handles to wheels, almost filled the back seat. But I was still terrified I was going to hit something. I knew I was covered, but I didn't want to have to. Going down these little tiny streets, including one-way streets. So I'm driving this way, and there were cars pointed back the other way on both sides. I was like, wait a minute, how does this happen on a one-way street? But it does. And they weren't all over on the side. They weren't over as far. It was scary. So we get to this hotel and there's a garage, parking lot in the back. Yay! So I get to the parking lot and the spaces are as wide as the SUV. No extra. They're as wide as the SUV. And there's the space, the driving space, and the space for the other car. And the driving space was, I think, smaller than the length of the SUV. So I'm trying to park, and I'm backing up and then forward and back and forward and back and forward and back and forward a lot. And the alarms are going off. And okay, now I'm stressed, I'm exhausted. And so Scott's like, I'm going to get out. And he was saying that it was overly sensitive on the alarms. He had to get out a couple of times when we were parking there because it was so hard to park there. But I managed it. I didn't hit anything. Came real close a couple of times, but I did not hit anything in the parking lot or anything else. So we got in. It was still early. First thing we did was take a nap. I think it was like a 2-hour nap, maybe 3. We woke up. It's still daylight out there. Thank God. But we were in our room for the night. We were going to be there the 2 nights. The night before we went to the museum, and then the night we were at the museum, and then we were driving to Manchester. I have to say that I thought the hotel room was okay. I really did. It was not the tiniest of things. They upgraded us to a handicapped room because he saw Scott with the rollator. Although the room itself was still tiny, he mentioned, it has a much bigger bathroom. The bathroom was decent sized. It had a low-rise shower, so it was only up about this high. The curtain went down one side, but not around the end. So when you were showering, it sprayed onto the sink, which was only about 2 feet from the floor and about this big. So you had to bend over to brush your teeth and stuff, a lot further than you would normally have to. The mechanics were a little weird on the shower, but that was fine. We fell in love with the toilet. It's the weirdest thing. They're all low flow toilets over there. Didn't matter where we went. The European toilet is different. It's not a bowl on a tall stand. It's a very deep bowl, like so. It's like double deep for our toilets here in the US. Which meant it shot the water down into the hole. So nothing stayed. It was gone. There was no question. And even without very much water, it was gone. And every toilet that we saw had the 2 buttons, one for the less water and one for the, we need a lot of water to get all this down kind of button. So, overall, it was great. The shower was weird. It made things really uncomfortable to walk on because the entire floor of the entire bathroom was wet when you got out. Because I didn't mention, on the side that had the shower curtains, they stopped about 18 inches from the floor. So there was no shower curtain for the bottom part on the side either. But we managed. We were so tired, I think it wouldn't have mattered whatsoever. We went out for dinner, and then we came back and we slept all night. And into the next morning. That afternoon, we went to the Warner Brothers London Studios in Leviston, which is where they filmed the Harry Potter movies. The actual film sets are there. And that was very cool. The big sets that stayed the whole time included the Great Hall, the Gryffindor bedroom. There were several others that stayed there. And when I went 2 years ago, I had the whole guide for listening to all this backstories and all that. We didn't have tickets until 4 o'clock. They actually let us in early because it wasn't busy. And we stayed there like 5 or 6 hours. It closed at 10, and I think we left at 9. But we got there early so that we could eat and make sure we found our way and everything. So I did that, and then hold on, something just came up on the Stashblaster Quilts. I want to make sure that one of you didn't write to me and say that there's a problem. So let me just look. I don't normally get things while I'm on. No, okay, good. Sorry about that. Since I had been there before, I kind of knew the things that I wanted to specifically see with Scott. They have changed things since I was there 2 years ago. It was still the Mischief Makers, and so they showed how they did some of the special effects and visual effects and that kind of stuff. But it was set up differently. There were different things that they were showing off, some of which they didn't show. So that was interesting. But I got to take him through, and we had a really good time. When we left, we went through the shop. We picked up gifts for my daughter-in-law and her brother Kim. And the more so we originally got Lauren a Cornish pixie, which is a bendable, full, posable rubber doll kind of thing. And we got a purple pygmy puff for Kim. And it makes this sound, it goes, brrr, which was kind of fun. And then the more I thought about it, I thought maybe it should go the other way, because Kim's favorite color is blue, and Lauren's into plushies. So I basically, when we gave it to them, I said, you guys get to figure out who's going to get which. I think they both work for both of you. Because I wasn't sure what we were going to be carrying and that sort of thing, the first thing we did when we got there was we actually went to the shop first. And we picked up this bag. So this is my Harry Potters of London bag. It's very nice. And then on the back, it has the H for Hogwarts. And because this I could hang on the back of the wheelchair, because they have wheelchairs there, first come, first serve. And so I was pushing Scott throughout the adventure. Because walking, we would never have finished. There's 3 parts to the museum. The first part is basically the sets. Now, there are more sets in the second part, but this is mostly the sets, information on how they did things like hair and makeup. You can ride a broom with a green screen if you want to. There's a bunch of activities that you can participate in if you want to. Of course, they almost all have fees. But you can do that. You can watch them demonstrate the different kinds of virtual effects. Then when you're halfway, there's a restaurant. So there's restaurants before you get in, and then there's restaurant right in the middle. And then when you leave the restaurant, you go outside, there's part 2. Now, in the restaurants, we weren't particularly hungry for food when we were there, but when we've been to Universal, we've really enjoyed the butterbeer. So we said, okay, let's do that here. Well, they had a whole bunch of different stuff that was butterbeer. So we spent so much money. But we had every butterbeer thing that they carry. So we had the regular butterbeer, the hot butterbeer, the frozen butterbeer. We had the butterbeer latte. I did not have that because I don't like coffee. There's butterbeer fudge. There was a butterbeer cupcake. There was a butterbeer meringue. I think that might be it. But it was something like 65 pounds that we spent on butterbeer stuff. We were so full when we were done. It was amazing the difference in flavor between the hot, the regular, and the iced. Personally, I think the ice that Universal does is better than the one that they do in London. The hot was pretty nice, though, I do have to say. The cupcake I thought was useless. It was basically a lemon cake with a little bit of spicing, and then a buttercream frosting, and then it had a butterbeer type drizzle. That was the only thing that was really butterbeer, was the drizzle. So that was kind of disappointing. But overall, we had a great time. So sorry, part 2. So we go outside. They have the bridge that you see at Hogwarts where the floor twists and bends like this. Neither of us went on that. They have a scale model of the Weasley house that you can go around. So that was interesting. They said that they used that model for most of the shots, but because you cannot scale flames, they had to build a set at like 1/3 or 1/4 the size for the time it gets destroyed in the movie. So that was interesting. And then you can walk through the Privet Street house. Now, all the way through, there are people there that are basically Harry Potter nerds that know everything. So I did track one down because there's this, in part 1, there's this whole wall of portraiture. And I said, I had heard that those were actually cast and crew. And she said, yes, that's 100% true. They dressed them in costume, and then they did actual oil paintings of them for the wall. And so she pointed out the director and the props director and some of the other camera people, that kind of stuff. So people got the opportunity to be commemorated forever in the movie, because those are some of the paintings that were not green screened. They were the solid ones that didn't move. And now they're in the museum too. So that was pretty cool. So we did the outside stuff. And when you buy the butterbeers, except the frozen one, which is in a flimsy plastic cup, they were in these like handled mugs. So they have a tankard washing station outside, so you can rinse them out if you want to take them home. And several people left theirs there, and we game with the kids every week. So we rinsed out a few extras that we hadn't paid for, and then we brought all those home. So now we can have our butterbeer mugs for our gaming nights. Anywho, so we went to the third part, which has a lot more of the in-depth stuff, like how they made the puppets, how they did all of the master castings for example, Warwick Davies, he plays several different roles in the movies. They had to do a live cast of him, and then they built up all of these different things. So like he was Griphook, he was Professor Flitwick, both versions of Professor Flitwick, and he was somebody else. I forget who the other one was. So how they did that, how they did all the goblin faces and the ogre faces and all the rest of this stuff. And you could see the actual size of some of these, which was very cool. You get to see Gringotts when it's still pristine with all the goblins down the sides, including the head goblin, which if you look around the back, he's sitting on a chair. There's no legs, but you can see him sitting on the chair. And there's a little ladder for him to climb up to get up to the seat. So if you don't actually peek, you don't know that there's no legs. But they used to be stored, all the other goblins used to be stored underneath the counters, but they have a whole bunch of them set up. So I got a picture of Scott handing money to one of the goblins So he's thinking he's going to put something on social media about, how our CFO is hiding money in foreign banks or something like that, just for the fun of it. I was thinking, we happily work with everyone, no matter where they're from. But yeah, he had to do his thing. So you've got this pristine Gringotts, and then later on, you have the destroyed Gringotts, where a film of the White Dragon comes and blows smoke and breathes fire and all of that stuff, and they've got these jets of steam and things to help sell the gig, but it was very cool. Then so you keep going through, and more techie stuff, including the architecture, and they show the whiteboard, the white cardboard models that they made, and all of this stuff. And ultimately, you get into this giant room, and you can walk all the way around, and it is the scale model of Hogwarts. And when I was there 2 years ago, I was asking, where's Hagrid's hut? If you're a Potter fan at all, you know that in the first season, his hut was up near the castle, and then it was down at the bottom of a hill. And now it was gone completely. Well, apparently because of the end movies, they got rid of Hagrid's hut, and that's where they put the boathouse. So it's not there at all. So that was kind of interesting. So they changed that whole model just for that. And then if you sit there long enough, they do the fireworks that the Weasley boys do, and they light up the different windows that from when they were making the fireworks during the exam, and the whole outside, and they do a whole shebang with that, and so that was a lot of fun. And so, but it's huge. It's, the model itself has to be at least 20 feet square, if not bigger. And so it was pretty amazing. So you go all the way down and around the outside, and then when you're down there, you can exit and go to the shops. Almost the whole time was fine with the wheelchair. The hardest parts were the dark forest, because it's rubberized, but it's really bumpy, and it's uphill and around corners and stuff. So that was a bit of a workout. And I had to get Scott out of the chair to go up Diagon Alley, because it's actually fairly steep and it's cobblestone, so the wheels would get stuck. And I just couldn't push him up it. So those were the two worst parts. So if you decide to go and you have a chair, be aware of that. I don't know because it says electric scooters are not allowed. I don't know if you could have somebody there who would be willing to help you push, or if you would have to take a side trip around those two things. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. Hi, Judy. So anyway, so then we went out through the shops, we picked up the things for the kids. Didn't find anything for my son. I really thought we'd be able to find something fun and silly. And I was highly disappointed that the only thing that even came close was a tote bag that said The Chosen One, but it was obviously for children. So we didn't get him anything there. We wound up getting him something else later. But overall, the museum was great, even on a second viewing. Then we went back to the hotel. It was another 87-point turn to get into a parking spot. But that was okay. I was much better rested. I was much more sanguine the second day. Then when we got up the next morning, we were driving to Manchester. Now, when I was in London, it was pretty bright most days. We were out walking around. It rained like once or whatever. And it was fairly bright in Leviston and London this time. But in Manchester, the entire time we were there, it was gray and overcast and just like bleh. But we get to the hotel. It is a Moxie. This is the second time we've stayed at a Moxie hotel. Not my fave. It is the smallest hotel room I've ever been in. We had a king-size bed. They say, I think it was a queen. And on this side, the door opened and almost touched the bed. And on this side, there was this much space. And then there was no closet whatsoever. There was a TV in a little niche, the depth of the bathroom, and they hung a grate on the wall with hangers. So you could take the hangers and hang your things on this grate, but if you put too much there, it blocked some of the TV for the person on the left. It's the smallest hotel room I've ever stayed in. Teeniest, tiniest little bathroom. The shower was my shoulder width plus about 2 inches. And it was about 1.5 of me long. That was it. The counter had to curve around the sink, which was about this big, because it had to retreat back so that you could actually sit fully on the toilet. Tiny little place. And there was no parking there. So you had to park about 6 blocks away in order to have a spot for your car. So I did that. After driving all day, I was tired, and that walk was all uphill all the way back to the hotel. And I got slightly turned around, so I wound up walking about 2 extra blocks. But we were there. That was what was important. We had talked about going to Scotland, but at that point, we were going to go the next day. And when we got up, we were just like, it's going to be 8 hours just on the train. I don't know that we need to do that. And so we basically took the day off, and we said, okay, well, tomorrow we're going to be meeting Maddie, my Romanian student, for dinner, but maybe we'll go and we'll check out some of these other places, like Liverpool or something. And we were just like, we're tired. So we stayed in the hotel the second day. So we didn't do anything in Manchester other than try to sleep and try to relax and eat. That's basically all we did. Excuse me. So Maddie came in. We went to dinner with her. Then there was the conference. The conference went well. The first day we were all in one big room. So it's more like the NAPO conference in that there's a lot of stuff for new organizers that's not client-centric. It's more business-centric. So it included things like talking about AI, for example, and how that may affect our businesses and that kind of stuff. And then when things wrapped up, it was a very pleasant day, but Scott was like, I'm done. So rather than going to the party that night, which apparently most of the delegates went to, that's what they call their attendees, is delegates. We went back to the hotel room. Although we spent a lot of time in Manchester sleeping and trying to sleep, it was not good sleep. Not only was the room tiny, but when you went to kneel on the bed, your knee went all the way through the mattress to the wooden frame. It was that soft of a mattress. It almost felt like an air bed. It wasn't, but it was almost like that. So it was just never really comfortable. So the second day I was speaking. So I got up, I did my thing. The speaker who was supposed to be before me didn't show up, so that was fine. It meant I got to go earlier. And then they had us do something called a focused networking session. It's like, I have no idea what this is. I was talking to them, they didn't know what this was. They thought this would be kind of cool to basically have an in-depth Q&A with questions related to what the person spoke about. Okay, fine. So that's what we did. And I think that went pretty well. And then then that night we had dinner with Maddie again and Hilda, who is from the Netherlands. So we had a really nice night doing that, with the idea that we'd be leaving the next morning. So the next morning, we got up, we got packed. We were really glad to be doing that. I got the car. I actually went and checked on the car a couple of times along the way, because on our drive from Lewiston to Manchester, it had a low tire pressure gauge marking, idiot light. And when I called Sixt, they said, well, do you want a different car? Well, no, but you have roadside assistance. Can they just go and check out the car and see if it's got a leak or if it's a sensor or what the problem is? They said, well, all we can do is change the car. I was like, I'm not going to sit there while they do that, so fine. Luckily, it was fine. We left in the morning around 8 a.m. and we drove back to Heathrow. We stopped along the way. We put air in the tires. I put water in the washer fluid reserve because it was no washer fluid, and got the whole front of my skirt soaking wet, which was not thrilling to me, but it was fine. Went around the airport at least twice, and I think 2.5, maybe 3 times by the time we figured out how to get to where the car got returned. Now, I'm driving on the left side of the road. It was a little uncomfortable, but it wasn't horrible, except on those little tiny streets I talked about earlier. It's kind of like where we are, there's toll lanes, and they have left exits. So the idea of being on the left and taking a left exit wasn't a problem. The problem is the roundabouts, because there's almost no stop signs. They're all roundabouts, and they're not really clear on how they're counting the exits on the roundabout. So there were several times that we had to backtrack, and at least going to Manchester, we went through this whole one rigmarole 3 different times before we could get the right exit to get out where we wanted to go. And so it's just take the 3rd exit, next roundabout, take the 2nd exit, next roundabout, take the 4th exit, next roundabout, take the 1st exit. And it's just like one after another, after another, after another, rather than lights and stop signs. Now, there are some, particularly in the cities, but man, it was tough, because the GPS wasn't quite keeping up on things the way it should. So I'm driving. Scott's over here, and he's looking at the maps, trying to figure out, well, we're basically going straight. And so that's what we started to do. And then that really wasn't what we were supposed to be doing. And so that part was a little bit of a nightmare. So yeah, it was a real challenge, but I think I equipped myself pretty well. I think I could manage the left side of the road driving. I did like that a lot of the streets in the city had a central post that would have a blue circle with an arrow to say, this is where you go. So I didn't mess up too much. But there were a whole bunch of these little tiny one-way streets. And at one point in Manchester, we were driving down one, and there's another car coming the other way down a one-way street. And we both dead-ended on this little tiny 2-way street. So it was like, oh my God. And they are not the most patient of people who don't know what they're doing and where they're going, but they're not overly honky either, which was very nice. Because I know I was ticking people off right and left just because I was going slow, trying to figure out what was going on and where I was going. So at least there was that. So we get back on the plane, and I manage, and I'm sitting next to Scott this time. Excuse me just a second. Unfortunately, I also brought back a little bit of sick, so did Scott. He has been post and prenasal dripping and coughing for 2 days. I just had the runny nose for a couple of days, but now I'm starting to get a little bit more post-nasally, so I'm not super happy. But anyway, so we went around Heathrow like 3 times to try to get the car returned. We finally got the car returned, and we said, okay, how do we get to Terminal 3? Because we're parking in Terminal 2. That's what we had to do. And he goes, okay, so you're going to go downstairs and you're going to go this way, and it's about 1.5 blocks, and then you're going to take the bus and it's going to take you to Terminal 3. And I just looked at him and he said, wait a minute. And there was a guy waiting over on the side, and he said, can you wait 5 minutes? And I'm like, yeah, because we were later than we wanted to be getting to the airport. We were still 2.5 hours early. And so he said, if you can wait 5 minutes, I will drop you right where you need to be, because he was the new driver. And so we weren't going to have to go and find the bus stop, because he would have been the one picking us up there anyway. He let us wait with him. The prior driver brought the van up, so we just got to load right there. Sweet guy. He took us right there to the Virgin Atlantic. We got in. They got us wheelchairs right away. They were not quite as helpful as the Dulles airport people were, because she didn't have a bag to put the walker in. So somebody else went and got us a bag, and then I had to carry it to the oversized area. That's not something that they did for us, which they did at Dulles, which was nice. But that was the only problem. So then they whisked us to a waiting area. Apparently they don't assign the gates until an hour before the plane is going to leave. So all of the gates are TBD, to be determined until then. So you don't know where you're going. That I would find disruptive, but they put us in one of those little buses that goes through the airport, and they took us and some other people, and off we went. And then we waited a little bit. Then they backed us up and took us someplace else, and that was our real gate. And we waited there, and then we got on, and everything was fine. That was also an overnight flight, but it was really cool because since we were heading west, we had a 2.5 hour long sunset. Because it started to turn, and then we were chasing it. So the sun was way down a long time over here, but we're still chasing it until the very end. And it was beautiful. It was so nice to look out the window for all that time and just see the sunset. So I enjoyed that a lot. The stewardess kept asking me if I was okay. Scott kept asking me if I was okay. I was feeling okay. I've been having this thing where it feels like there's a cat sitting on my chest. So I had already arranged that I was going to see the doctor when I got back. So that made everybody a little bit happier. Now, we got back on Saturday, and then on Sunday, I had an assessment, and then my son, his wife, and Kim all came over, and John had wanted to take an extending table that I have, because he's got this new game. It's a 12-hour playtime on this game. And his table doesn't quite fit the game properly, and especially not for 6 people. His thinking is that Lauren and Kim's parents, Scott and myself, and John and Lauren are gonna play this game at some point. So like this is an entire weekend that we would have to do this. So I'm loaning him 2 3x6 folding tables. In fact, he's gonna come over tomorrow and sew a tablecloth for it. I don't have the fabric here. It's a red and gold stripe. And then we're gonna see how this goes. I can't imagine that we're gonna spend 12 hours playing this game with them, but who knows? Okay, give it a try. We're just gonna have to see. I don't know what to say about that. Anyway, so we played after he determined that the table that I owned is not big enough. Now that I loaned him the folding tables, but he had to help me dig out the table. And then I've been working like crazy yesterday and Monday, because when you go on a trip, I don't know if this happens to you, but I got slammed with work just before because people wanted to be seen before I left, and then they wanted to be seen the instant I came back, so I'm slammed with work this week and next week. So I haven't had a chance to do anything. Like I said, nothing has happened here. I walked into this room for the first time since I got back, just in time to start the YouTube for tonight. So, I did do some planning on my trip, but that's as far as I got. I will worry about the wedding quilt and some of this other stuff in the weeks to come, but nothing really happened in these last 2 weeks in terms of advancing any of the quilts. I did get a couple of interesting emails from you folks, though. You can't, it's not up. If you want to email me, it's mail, M-A-I-L, at stashblasterquilts.com. If you send me an email, I do try to respond to those. And so somebody wrote to me about an orphan block that she's got, and she was saying she has several that were poorly sewn, and so they're puffy. And she's like, it's going to be lumpy no matter what I do. I don't think I can quilt this out. So I was looking at the photos that she sent. I do not have permission to show them to you. She asked me not to. But she sent me photos and asked what could she possibly do. You can abandon it. That's always an option. But in this particular case, what I suggested is that she trapunto the flower petals and leaves, because that's where it's all puckered up and doesn't lay flat, and then quilt the background down nice and solid. So if she echo quilts around and makes that part flat, then all the poofiness of the flowers and the leaves she can fill with extra batting. And she said, that's great, but this is only like 3 blocks. And it's not enough for a whole quilt, but I also don't know what else to do with this. And I said, there's no reason you can't have some blocks trapuntoed and some not, if that's what she chose to do. But then we talked about things like maybe making bags out of them or something else. But that trapunto will help fill those out and round them out. And if you've basically stitched in the ditch at the bottom, it may not be a perfectly smooth curve. It may look a little jagged. But if you think about petals and leaves, a lot of times there's a little wonky in there. They've got some little holes, or they've got something else going on. They're not perfectly smooth and rounded domes. So I think it's going to look pretty good when she's done. The focus, though, is going to have to be to keep that back flat. Don't just put a little bit of quilting there. Put a lot in that backing. And then don't put any into the flowers and petals unless you want to do that as an accent. But keep in mind, if you do a leaf and you do a decorative line of stitching and there's trapunto, Now you've got two bulbousy pieces, one on each side of that stitching. And then if you put in the lines, it's going to change it again. It's perfectly fine if that's what you choose to do, but with the trapunto, it's going to be even more noticeable than it would be normally. And I'm sorry, I am dry. And then I got an email from somebody who said, I have a ton of 3 and 4 inch blocks, because apparently for a while, she was just doing a lot of quilts with 3 and 4 inch blocks, and she made extras. And she was saying, if I put them all into one quilt, that's a lot of piecing. And my thing is, yeah, so? Having quilts with lots of piecing is not the problem. Having quilts with disjointed piecing or not standard, it's a weird way to call it. You wouldn't want to have a quilt where over here is nice and square and orderly, and then nothing quite fits and matches in the middle, and that's the rest of the quilt. If it's going to be uneven, then make it all uneven, so it looks like it's a design choice, not a failure of piecing. And so we were talking about that. So one of the things to think about that I didn't mention when I talked about the different things you can do with your orphan blocks is there is some stylistic questioning that goes on. Sooner or later, yes, you need straight edges to sew together, but they don't have to be, they have to be straight, but they don't have to be square. They don't have to be parallel. They don't have to be the same size piece all the way through the whole block. You can have a really wonky block. That's fine. But don't have a full 9 patch just kind of stuck in it somewhere. Right? That's nice and square, because that's going to be disjointed. Excuse me. Go for the flavor of the whole thing. And so she says, I've got all of these blocks. It's going to be too much for one quilt. I said, well, first of all, it depends on the size of the quilt, right? Because king-size quilts take an awful lot of blocks. Because if they're 4 inches raw, that means they're 3.5 finished. That's a lot. I don't know why. I'm sorry. All of a sudden, I am so tired. And yawning. And it just came out of the blue. Anyway. King-size quilt, it's going to be a lot. Baby quilt, it's going to be a lot, but not too many. It might be too color confusing for an infant, so you might not want to give it to an infant and do a baby quilt with it anyway. But I've done king-size quilts with 1 inch blocks. It can be fine. It just takes a little bit of thought to make sure it's going to work the way you intended it to work. Rather than just randomly putting things together. Now, can randomly putting things together work? Yes, as long as you're randomly putting things together for the entire top and not just part of it. I have done a lot of quilts where I have crazy quilt pieces that I have randomly put together. I do this a lot, like with flying geese. I will make a block of improv, let's say all blue, okay? And then I will cut it into 4 flying geese. And then I will put those 4 flying geese into my quilt, and that'll be fine, even if they're the only improv blocks, because what I've basically done is make a new pattern, a new block fabric. And it's an accent. So if I was doing an entire quilt top of flying geese and having a few that were pieced, is going to add interest. So if you're going to do one, do a few, but make it a design choice, and don't just have, 6 flying geese that are improv piece down here and none anywhere else in the quilt. You need to kind of spread things out. Unless, see, this is what I'm saying, is it's all design. You could put a little fence around that portion, and say, like, my family is the odd ducks, right? So, and then put, my family in that area, and that's the ones that are all wacky colored and wild, and this is the rest of the world. So even if you want to do it, just make it a understandable design choice, and it'll work. These orphan blocks are going to stretch your brain to try to come up with ways to use them. Get creative, okay? 4-inch blocks are fine. If that's too much for you, you can take 4 4-inch blocks, put them together, and then that becomes a 4 would be 3.5. So that's going to be a 7-inch block. And then if you want to have solid blocks next to that, that's fine. Play around with it. Play around with it. Give it some time. Give it some thought. Don't obsess, though. This project is not for the perfectionist, because you're never going to have exactly the right pieces to make it exactly perfect. This whole idea of using orphan blocks is going to occasionally drive you nuts. And you're like, why am I doing this? None of this is working. In order for this to work, I need to make 27 more blocks. If you ever say that to yourself, stop. The goal behind this project is not to make extra blocks to be able to use up your orphans. The goal of this project is to use up what you have as much as you can, and keep in mind what you have for when you're doing other things later. And there is no reason you can't take a 12-inch snowball block, pop it on the back of a quilt, and call it a label. Okay? That's fine too. You can turn all of these orphans into labels. It doesn't matter. Okay? Don't hurt yourself over the process of using these guys up. That's not the idea here. Okay? So I'd like you to go ahead, work on this again for the next couple weeks. I have my boxes back here of stuff that I've been doing before I left, and now I'm going to be able to start doing again. Overall, just as a quick recap, I did have a great time with England. I am very glad to be home. It was good, but having my own bed and my own things makes life so much better. So the next time we're back is going to be March 1st. If this is your first time here and you've enjoyed yourself, great. I am so happy to hear that. Please feel free to like, subscribe, do all of those internet-y things. I'm just checking here. Yep, okay, I did answer those. I'm on the first and third Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We did just have daylight savings last weekend, which totally messed everybody up. But from 7 to 8 7 to 8, the first and third Wednesdays of the month. I'm happy to have you here. If you want to be one of the people that watches and lurks in the background, that's cool. If you want to watch it later and then send me notes, I would love that. Again, mail@stashblasterquilts.com is the email address to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. And I answer questions as best as I can. If it's something really personal, I will reply back to you directly. And it can be not just quilting, it can be organizing in general. But if it's quilting related, I may wait and talk about it here. Because if you've got a question or you're looking for some ideas, like the trapuntoing of the flowers, somebody else is going to have the same problem, and I would love to be able to help them out at the same time. So thank you so very much, those of you who are here now and those of you who watch later. the more of us that get to hang out, the better. And I really, really appreciate your support. So I hope you all have a great couple of weeks, and I'll have some stuff to show next time. At the very worst, we're going to be sewing on the wedding quilt. All right? So take care and have a good one. Bye-bye. It's not letting me stop the stream.